Take command. Logan Paulson there. Craig Hoffman here. Logan, let's talk about the offensive line. And let's start with the run game, and then we'll circle back to some of the pass protection and how those two things interplay. But I said last week, I was like, I wonder if they just run a lot more straightforward stuff this week. Let's kill some of the pullers. Like if the whole goal is to fire off the ball and get going, maybe they'll just run a bunch of inside zone or duo and see if they can fire off the ball. Well, they tried, and in the first half, it didn't go so great. And then they found some things in the second half. They brought in some of the bounce. They brought in some of the GT. They brought in some of their best plays. And then were able to mix in some of the other stuff that they kind of more of their regular run formula and really got the run game going in the second half. What did you see from kind of the supporting plan, if you will? We just talked so much about Jayden, but the supporting plan is specifically the run game in this game.
Yeah, I think when you look at kind of their most effective runs, and it kind of falls in the vein of the season. And so what I'm going to say is that, like, obviously the zone read was really effective. There's an explosive run where Jayden keeps it, and there's an explosive run after that where he hands it off to B-Rob. I think it's like a 12-yard gain, something like that. So obviously that's a big part of the offense. And the problem with zone read is you're going to have some kind of neutral or not good runs, but it does give you this opportunity for explosive plays. And obviously the zone read, for people who don't know, is like when Jayden is reading the defensive end, and the defensive end stays, he hands it to the running back. If the defensive end collapses, he pulls it. And I will say he made Matthew Judon look kind of not great on one of those plays, like that was a tough look for him. And then I think the other thing that popped out is when they were able to get Atlanta in their 4-down spacing, they ran what I would call like influence trap. Some people call it straight trap. So basically like the 3 technique is, imagine you've got your offensive line. There's a guy over the guard, right? He's the 3 technique. He's going to shoot up the field. Think you're Grady Jarrett's, right? Really big penetrator. You're going to just pull and trap that guy and knock him out of his gap. And the way they ran it is they would pull 2 guys basically. And I know you're not technically pulling the center, but it basically feels like you're pulling 2 players. The linebackers play across. It lets you, on the people releasing to the second level, get there. And they ran that play twice with really excellent success. And and it's a play that they haven't run a ton of. And so it was really good to see them again. B-Rob hits an explosive on it, I want to say, in the second quarter. And he also hits an explosive on it in the third quarter. And they tried to run it with Chris Rodriguez on that. I think it was the first down in the red zone where he has a 4-yard run and breaks like 12 tackles. He breaks 4 tackles. But
dude,
that's the best 4-yard run I've ever seen, quite honestly.
That was crazy.
It was tremendous. But they ran it with some like kind of middling success. They had 2 really explosive plays and then 2 plays that were just okay. And then they ran like a wham, like where they kind of bring the tight end back across and were able to. So in terms of stuff that they normally run, like they didn't really run a lot of GT. They ran 1 bounce. It was for the touchdown to Chris Rodriguez. And that gets a little bit dicey because Bates gives up penetration, but great job by Cosme kind of fighting through the foot traffic, makes a great block on the safety. And then the center does a really good job of getting to the second level and kind of making a wall there. And Chris breaks a tackle and gets in there. So in terms of stuff that's worked, zone read, trap was really effective. But again, like to your point, there was 4 or 5 runs that were what I would say like really efficient and good that led to explosive opportunities. And the other stuff was a little bit kind of middling. And I think that's one of the reasons you see a lot of quarterback runs down in the low red from Kliff, because you don't have a ton of confidence in the consistency of it, right? Like I think when you compare it or juxtapose it to the Atlanta rushing attack, think about how efficient that thing was in the first half, right? Where there's lanes, there's creases, they're running they ran a little bit of duo, which we'll talk about here in a second, but there was a confidence that you could just kind of call whatever and they were going to make it work. And while there was some efficiency to the rushing attack, I didn't feel the down-to-down consistency like you're talking about. There's a bunch of plays where they're trying to run a duo or trying to run like a tight zone wanda where you're getting those tight double teams, and Grady Jarrett splits it and blows it up in the backfield for a 0-yard gain. And great job by Grady, like in terms of his ability to split double teams and sit a knee and make plays. But I think that's how I would characterize the rushing attack. Some stuff was really hyper efficient, but there was other things that just didn't look super sharp.
Yeah. I think their best drive of the game, running wise, was their first drive of the fourth quarter. And it is the drive that ends on the basically ends on the Cosby hold, what should have been the OZ game sealing touchdown with 4:43 to go. But they start off that drive in 12 personnel and do this little play action half roll, and then it's just an easy comeback to OZ. And they basically win at the line of scrimmage. They win on alignment there, where there's nobody, just not enough dudes in coverage because they're expecting run. And OZ breaks tackle, gets 16 yards, and then they bring Zach on the field. Atlanta goes back to their nickel personnel, and it's a zone read keeper. They get huge movement. They finally really win at the line of scrimmage on a duo play. B-Rob gets 11. I think the next play is the big bounce play where B-Rob gets 12. They run a wham. They run another little half roll, play action fake. That's the one where John Bates almost kills a guy at the goal line. And then they do some silly stuff once they get in the red zone.
Old Y leak right there.
Yeah, one of my favorites. Love the Y leak.
Love the setup there too. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and so they got it going there, but I think outside of that drive, it's a lot of hit or miss on the runs, and I think there's a couple missed assignments. I remember one play where Coleman goes the wrong way, or no, sorry, not Coleman. Trent Scott goes the wrong way, and you're like, ugh, because it's blocked up really well otherwise. But I think by and large, they just didn't get the movement up front early in this game. And for a team that was really talking about, we want to fire off the ball, we want to move people, we want to be physical, I'm curious how you saw that element. Because just because you try hard doesn't mean you're going to get results. It's the NFL. The other guys are paid too. But did you feel like from a technique standpoint and from kind of what they set out to accomplish based off their own stated goal of firing off the ball and moving people, they were doing that at a good enough level, especially early in this game?
I think it was better. I think it was better than what you saw versus Philly and what you saw versus New Orleans. I do think you're running into some issues from a talent standpoint, you know what I mean? And so for example, some of the best run games that I've been a part of, obviously, as a player, the coaches really understand what you're good at and where you're weak, and I think as the season's going on, you're seeing this team and this coaching staff have to understand that a little bit more. We're not, at least to my eye, I think these guys are really good football players. I enjoy watching them. I enjoy how they play, the energy, the effort, the attitude that they play with. But you also understand what they're good at. And to me, they're not guys that are just going to sink double teams and move you off the spot. That's not who they are, right? So we got get a little bit creative, and that's where the GT stuff comes in. That's where the bounce stuff comes in. And that's where I really like the addition of kind of this influence trap, right? Because with influence trap, the guys kind of blocking themselves, and you're using the defenders are blocking themselves, and you're kind of using your athleticism to get there and kind of move guys off position, right? It's like a surprise, and I understand you got to have some tough runs. But that's kind of what your zone read has been for this year, right? It's a way to kind of loosen up the defensive line and linebackers because the quarterback can keep the football. And I know that's not always the most efficient, but in this game, you 25-yard carry by Jayden Daniels and a 12-yard carry by B-Rob. So awesome job. Love that. So I think that's where I think the run game's got to go. You got to think do we like these matchups? We have to just be a little bit more fastidious about, hey, we can't just call whatever we want. Early in the year, they were really good at running Wanda. They had a lot of variations off of it, and it was really effective. But I think as the year's gone on, teams have kind of figured that out. They've kind of figured out that we like to run GT and bounce a lot, and they've got solutions, right? They penetrate, they get up the field, they close in a certain way. So now it's okay, what's the next step? And so it was nice to me to see some kind of innovation there with the trap stuff, which again led to some explosive opportunities. And so now it's just how do you keep putting these guys who are good athletes and good competitors in the best position to be successful? And I know that is, as a coach, that's really, really hard to do because you're not always going to be able to win with the pen, and they got to win matchups on their own sometimes. But I think that's the way that the running game is going to need to go as they get into the playoffs.
Yeah, I think that you see some of that creativity as the game goes too. And some of it's simple and fairly nuanced where like even the timing of some motions and like if Bates is going to be a sifter on inside zone or tight zone, right? Sometimes it's at the snap, he's running back across the formation and trying to run his face into Matthew Judon or whoever on the other side. Sometimes they motion him and it's before the snap that he's hitting kind of the same assignment. It's just the line on the paper goes from a dotted or from a straight line across to a dotted line because that indicates motion when coaches are drawing up plays. And you see the impact that has of kind of slowing that edge player down, coming back inside. It opens up a little bit more of a cutback lane at times. You see some of the jet motion in this game, the orbit motion. You see an actual jet sweep end around to Olamide Zaccheaus, which then you see stuff off of that. And so I think Kliff did a really good job of sequencing plays. They used some unbalanced lines at times, again, in this game. And sometimes they run at the weak side, if you will, right? Like you move Brandon Coleman from left tackle to whatever you want to call that right tackle position. I don't know whether you call it new right tackle or a tight end.
Right tight end. He's the big tight end,
Yeah, and then they'd have Bates and Sennett or Bates and Ertz next to Allegretti on the left. And I think the 25-yard Jayden carry, if I'm remembering correctly, is off of that, where it's not like, I guess technically it's a zone read, but I don't even know if he's reading that. I think it just looks like zone read, and he's keeping that thing all the way.
He's for sure reading it. It's just, but again, like I think he had one.
But the edge is just so sealed. There's not like an unblocked player that's right there, you know?
It was there's two. So he runs one, obviously where Matthew Judon, and he just beats him to the edge. And there's another one where, like, based on formation, you're like in a two receiver set, and they walk the read player, and so the read player then becomes I guess the weak side inside linebacker who's running to the line of scrimmage. And he had one again. They ran the play twice where he gave it, and it gets a little bit messy because the 4-eye is playing across the tackle's face, and it kind of just makes a big muddy pile in there for B-Rob to run into. And so he's like, I'm going to pull it. And so it's basically like, I don't know if I would coach him to pull that, but like, Jayden Daniels is a better athlete than Caden Ellis, and I'm going to get 7 yards. And so it's essentially that's what it boiled down to me, was like, is that like the perfect pull look? Probably not, but like, I'm a better athlete than you. And that's one thing about having a quarterback that can do that kind of stuff, is like, even if he's not making the best decision as a puller, or maybe maybe that's an unscouted look, for example, I'm going to make you right. And I think that's, again, we talk about what makes this performance from Jayden special. Some of these elements are what makes him special. Like even the one to Judon, like I would not have pulled that because Judon does not move his feet. Like he kind of plays it like that kind of classic read technique. But Jayden's like, Judon, I'm faster than you. I'm just going to beat you to the edge, and there's no contained player. So big play.
And they also use the fact that like certain situations, Falcons probably going to play man, and like Terry's able to just run the corner off, and all of a sudden that's why there's no contained player. So like there's some real nuance and creativity to the run game. And again, whether it's that read player being on the second level where Jayden just has a better angle and he knows he can win to the edge, versus him being in the guy's face right at the mesh point. Like there's just little things that I think they found as the game went on that were really good. They run, I mean, that double fake truck taxi play where Jayden gets 5. It's a 5-yard game, but like it is so blocked up. And I just imagine if you're the Falcons at that point being like, what am I supposed to be reading here? Like because that's the same drive where they hit the end around to Zaccheaus, and then Zaccheaus is faking an end around on that play. They've also hit a couple of stretch plays, and they fake that. They fake the reverse, and then Jayden starts to take off. And so then you're able to get back to some simpler stuff on the ground because all of a sudden the linebacker's eyes are thrown off. And so I think that's like one of the things that makes Kliff special is eventually he'll just throw you off, and then you can get back to some of your more basic stuff because the defense is unsettled.
No, I think that's right. And that's kind of what we were just talking about, right? Like we're not the Philadelphia Eagles, right? We're not going to be able to just line up and be able to run duo and Wanda and just straight outside zone. Like I love that there's little wrinkles there to just increase the efficiency. Like you're talking about, like to the jet sweep to OZ, like great job by OZ. That's an 8-yard gain. Or the fake reverse that where B-Rob's a wildcat guy and he fakes the reverse to Jayden and it's a 6-yard gain. Like, those are productive plays that put your guys in better positions to be successful. They create better angles to the second level. And like, that's big time stuff. And it's again, like what's the wrinkle of the zone read? Like we just talked about getting in that formation where they have to walk the will linebacker out, like just to make it create a little bit more space. Like I love that kind of stuff. And I'm not sure if that's Anthony Lynn who's doing that, but everybody involved in the offense. Like I think that's where you got to kind of hunt and peck and grind for those details. And I think the one problem with that, and the important thing to point out there, is if you're wrong as a coaching staff, then it becomes a long day running the football. But I like that there were some wrinkles here. And I don't remember what B-Rob ended up averaging, but I think it was much better.
He averaged 4.6.
Yeah, it was much better
13 for 60.
Yeah, much better than it's been over the last couple of weeks. And again, you get heroic efforts like Chris Rodriguez had on the touchdown and on that first yard run we just talked about. But I think on the whole, like I like the innovation. And again, you talked about the techniques and the combinations. And at this point, I'm not sure that's who these guys are. Like they're not going to be able just to blow you off the ball. And so, and most offensive lines are. Like when we're talking about those blow off the ball kind of guys, you're talking about Detroit, you're talking about Philly, and like maybe Atlanta. I don't know if you want to put them in there, but that's the kind of groups you're talking about. Lots of first round picks, lots of big, strong, physical dudes. And so I like that we're being innovative. We're finding some new stuff to do, and hopefully they can keep that going, on a long playoff run, which would be great. So.
Yeah. I will say if they got to get Biotish back, getting Wiley or Lucas back in there is going to be very helpful as well, from both the communication and just like let's get better movement. Let's get to the second level quicker. Just
getting things targeted.
I'm not trying to be mean to Michael Dieter, but like Tyler Biotish is a significantly better player.
And Dieter, I think that's the other thing is being a backup player is hard. Like I was a backup player for a big chunk of my career. It's hard to come in and execute at a super high level. And there's a reason you're a backup player. Like it's harder to win one-on-ones. It's harder to win in pass pro. And like if you were better,
you don't get the reps during the week. It's all that stuff. And
so like if I was a better player, I'd be the starter, right? Like that's kind of how it works out. You know what I'm saying? So like, and again, this is not a knock on Dieter, but there is a significant drop off in the pre-snap penalties for whatever reason when he comes in, and also with some of the one-on-one stuff. And he had some really, we're going to be critical of him, but we're also going to give him a compliment. Like great block on the touchdown. There was a third down run to B-Rob, I want to say, where B-Rob had like an 8-yard gain, where he does a great job reaching the 2Y, like really tough block. So he did some really good things, but again, there's just a little bit of a drop off because Biotish, I think right now, is like probably a top 5 center in the NFL, at least the way he's played this year. So anytime you're losing a player of that caliber, it's going to be a significant drop off. So again, Dieter did some really good stuff where I was like, man, like in my notes, like great job, Dieter, like awesome. But also there's some stuff where you lose quick on a one-on-one in a pass pro situation, and Jayden's got to vacate a pocket. So there's a little give and take. But overall, like you're saying, if the O-line can get healthy, like that's always a huge issue. Because say what you want about Wiley as a pass protector, and like, is he a top 10 tackle in the NFL? No, but he's pretty damn good in the run game because he's fast. He can get guys cut off. He can get to combinations at the second level well. And you do feel his presence or his absence in the run game with these guys, especially because he's got really good chemistry with Cosme.
Right.
And so like there's all that.
I think you see that in this game too. There's a bunch of like stunts and twists and TEs and this and that. And they did not pick a lot of those up as well as they would if all the regular 5 starters were playing, which is why those guys are starters. Chris Rodriguez also, I cannot believe his stats are 5 for 16. That is the best 5 for 16 running back performance I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
Last thing real quick on the offense, which we should have talked about maybe first. So my bad as the driver of the bus here. But the lack of explosive, not just plays, but the lack of explosive opportunities in this game, in the passing game. They're just, sometimes you watch the tape back and you're like, yeah, it's because they didn't throw and missed 7 deep shots in the game.
Yeah.
And that was not the case watching this tape. They obviously missed the one that they actually attempt to Terry, but like Jayden's spray chart, you don't have to zoom out very far to see all the throws in this one. And it wasn't, I think there was a lot of quick game called. What do you make of the game plan, why that was? I mean, we knew it'd be tough because they don't have any vertical speed outside of Terry. Diami's out in this game, and Noah Brown is out. But to not even really feel like they're trying it, one, is that accurate? And two, what do you make of it?
I think that's a really good question. I do think there are some shots down the field, like we talked about those like intermediate crossers, like those can be explosive plays, kind of chunk plays down the field. There's a couple digs, right? The one that they missed to Terry. There's the one that Ozzy, by his own admission said he dropped. Like those plays are explosive plays, but in terms of like shot plays, I don't see a lot of them. And again, like that is something that I'm a little concerned about, is like, how do you find explosive plays given the skill set that you have at receiver at the moment? And, obviously AJ Terrell did a great job with Terry. Like, he just matched up and really, negated Terry's impact on this game. So, how do you find those? And I don't think it's surprising that on their touchdown drives, they do find explosive plays. Now, one comes on a busted coverage where Zach, rumbles for whatever, is it 40 yards? And
37, yeah.
Then the other one is Jayden keeping it for 25 yards on his own read. So there are other ways they're getting to explosive plays. But as you play better teams, as you kind of make this push into the playoffs, like, how do you find those ops? And again, I like the call to John Bates in the low red on the leak, where like that's kind of a manufactured explosive, which is great. But that's something that I find a little concerning. And while I'm concerned about that, I also think Jayden scrambling, the design quarterback runs, and the quick game also raise the floor of this offense significantly. So it's not quite as important because they're super, super hyper efficient at that stuff. But it's something to keep an eye on, definitely moving forward.
If they can just not commit penalties, they can actually play this way.
Yeah. Which is surprising, which is like crazy, because it's like not many teams can do this.
Right. And that's the thing, is how often have we talked about for the Commanders defense, just don't break and the other team will mess it up. And that is typical in the NFL. This team can actually play pretty clean football, in part because Jayden will extend the drive once or twice with his legs, either by extending a play and finding a dump off, or actually just running for the first down himself. But we've seen consistently this team doesn't go 3 and out a ton. They picked a real bad time for their second one of the game on Sunday, late. But by and large, they don't go 3 and out a ton. They move the ball. They'll play the field position game a little bit. Even if they wind up punting, it's typically after 1 or 2 first downs. So your field position is not too bad. But they also just have been able to drive the ball up and down the field on teams all year between the 20s. And then it becomes a game of whether or not they can execute in the red zone. And they've been better in the second half of the season. But they literally attempted one pass over 20 yards in this game. And it was the deep shot to Terry that he misses. It's the same. It's a slot fade. It's the same ball that he hits. Well, I guess technically it's not the same exact play, because last time they didn't actually line anybody outside of Terry in the Philly game. But it's basically the same route from the same spot. It's just there's I think Jameson's lined up outside him this time, but he misses it, and it's because it's a hard throw, and they made it look easy in the Philly game. But yeah, it definitely was interesting to watch. There's just not a ton, because in part they don't have the horses to do it. Like, I just don't know who's running those routes besides Terry. And I also think the last thing we should talk about is, like, Terry only 1 catch, 5 yards in the game. And I don't necessarily, after watching it back, feel like he was super ignored or they didn't try to get him the ball. Like there's a batted ball in the third quarter, I think it is, maybe it's the fourth, where he's wide open on a slant and Jayden throws it to him, and unfortunately 53 for Atlanta just makes a good play. He's getting blocked in the line, like good block by Chris Rodriguez, and he just gets his hands up and knocks it down. That's probably a 20-yard gain if Terry catches it, because he's catching it on the move and able to run. But Terrell did a good job. They tried to get him the ball a couple other times, and they're incompletions. So this wasn't a game where, like, Terry was super ignored. Like, there wasn't a concerted effort at times to get him the ball. It just didn't work out. And for as great as Terry is, especially if he's a little bit banged up, that's going to happen.
Yeah, no, I think there were times where I was watching him run routes, like in cuts and things, where he's usually pretty excellent at it, and just looked like, 87, 89%, not quite 100%. And I think when you're going up against a guy like AJ Terrell, who, again, his movement skills in the secondary are really impressive. And I know he's had kind of some inconsistencies over the course of his career, but he was impressive in this game in terms of his ability to cover and stay in good phase. And that's going to be challenging. And so hopefully Terry gets healthy, because, again, he's been a big part of the explosive elements of this offense. But I do feel like they're definitely, maybe it was 5%, but there was a 5% difference. And sometimes that's all it takes to not be as effective. So something to keep an eye on, definitely moving forward.
For sure. Anything else on the offense before we talk about the defense and what they did?
No, I think that's it. Great day by Jayden Daniels, and obviously OZ. I mean, just like his ability to. I think that's the other thing too with OZ. Some of the quick game stuff, some of his strength as a runner really showed up. Taking a 6-yard gain, making it 10. They talk about the the jet sweep and his ability to kind of break a tackle and fall forward for 10 on that. Like that, lots of hidden yards there just from his ability as a runner to kind of elevate some of that lower leverage quarterback stuff with the quick game and make it not explosive plays, but 10, 12-yard chunk. So kudos to him. And just everyone's kind of got a role. You know what I mean? Like OZ explosive play versus Philly, Jamison Crowder 2 touchdowns, Zach Ertz big game this week. Like they're kind of in a land where without having Noah Brown and a banged up Terry, like people are having to step up and fill different roles. So really curious to see how that goes over the next couple of weeks. And I think Dallas will be a good kind of like where they're at in terms of some of these role players having to step up.